All right. Well, welcome back to another episode of the Just Stories with BT podcast. Today is a very special episode. We're continuing on with our Recycle Dream series where we talk to CEOs, entrepreneurs, businesses who have done a lot of giving back as a way to, A, something that they love to do, but also B, something that kind of catapulted them into ultimate success. And so today's guest is very special because if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't even be doing this podcast. So today I have Mark Kinsley. So thank you and welcome so much.
Great to be here, BT, on Just Stories. I am honored. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. It's been a really cool day. So before we get into it, obviously this podcast is based around stories, getting to know you, the person behind the CEO of Englander, the person behind the best-selling Amazon author of Come Back to Bed. And so we'll get into some stories. We'll get into talking about giving back. But first, a lot of people listening to this will know you somewhat, but they're used to you asking questions, so you are a host of a very successful podcast. So you ask lots of questions, but the questions don't normally come back at you. So that'll be fun today. But I do know this, you and your partner, Mark Quinn, love to talk. And so I couldn't just let you introduce yourself because I was afraid you may just start rambling and I don't know how long you're going to introduce yourself. So I'm going to do it for you. Sound good? So think
that sounds good. And the odds are really good that that's what would happen.
Yeah. So think Ace Ventura when he goes looking for Ray Finkel and he gets to his house and he walks up and opens the door and he's like, I'm looking for Ray Finkel. And the guy points the gun at him, and he's like, and a clean pair of pants. And then he goes and says all the stuff. So that's what I'm going to do. So that way I can introduce you in a minute or so. Sound good? All right, here we go. So for everyone out there, this is Mark Kinsley. Okay. So you were born in Joplin, Missouri, but you didn't grow up there. You grew up in Riverton, Kansas, which has one stoplight, making it a very small town. So you're probably maybe the most famous person from all time out of Riverton, Kansas. You have an older brother. You have two step siblings, an older brother and an older stepsister. Your first job was baling hay, which I've never done, honestly. But your second job I have done, which was picking up golf balls at a range. And you did admit that the awesome and the more important part of that job was ripping cigs and driving the golf cart. I'm assuming you took the governor out so you could go super fast. That's what I did. You grew up playing a ton of basketball. You were great. You went to Missouri Southern State University where you got your degree. Then you went to Pittsburgh State University for your MBA. That led you into a career of this amazing career path, right? In 2006, you met Tara Kinsley. You've now been married for 15 years. Congrats. You got into marketing. You weren't just right into the sleep industry. And so one of your big gigs in marketing was hooking up with Leggett and Platt, where you met Mark Quinn. I don't know, maybe you met him before, but you guys worked on a massive project there, which was launching hybrid mattresses. It was an ad campaign. It was not just to launch this cool category. There would be $1 billion category, which is unbelievable. But even better, you launched the greatest mattress industry hip hop video of all time, which I will put at the end of this for anyone who hasn't heard it. 2014 was a massive year for you because one, you went to work for Leggett. Two, you launched Dos Marcos podcast. So we'll talk about that a ton. 2019, you left Leggett & Platt to become the president of Englander Mattress and later the president and CEO. And then in 2021, you launched The Fan, which is absolutely amazing. So how did I do?
That was amazing. There was only one part I think that I left out that would add a little bit of flavor to it, which was early in my career, when I was 19, one of my first jobs kind of out of college, in college, was classic rock overnight DJ. So classic rock, Big Dog 97.9, you're rocking with the Maverick in the AM. It is 32 in Alba, looking at 64 in Joplin. Why the disparate temperatures? Who knows? The world could be collapsing on us, but more classic rock, In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida coming up. And that's what I would play. I would play In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida by Iron Butterfly because it was 17 minutes long. And I could, once again, go out and rip cigs.
Nice. Hold on, let's backtrack 1 second because I thought I heard in there real quick that you said coming to you from, is this the Maverick? Was that your name? Did you say something about Maverick?
When you're the midnight to 5 a.m. guy, you do not use your real name. And the backstory to the Maverick is when we were in 5th grade, there was a place called the Flip Shop. And we would go to the Flip Shop and it was tumbling and trampolines and all that. But me and my friends decided to make wrestling videos. And so, going off the top ropes, breaking tables, all kinds of fun wrestling moves. And so everybody had to have a character name. I mean, my buddies came up with, I was the Maverick. And so the Maverick extended from early days wrestling videos at the flip shop to overnight classic rock DJ, where you don't want to use your real name, because you get some pretty interesting people calling that, like really nice people, but also some that are really weird. And I was basically broadcasting from the middle of a field outside of Joplin, Missouri, with a giant tower with the red light. And people are like, I'm pretty sure that's where the radio station is.
Oh my God.
Well, the first night though, here's the little sidebar on it. The first night I come in to the radio station, the guy that was there was a crusty old DJ.
Yeah.
And he was the 7 to midnight guy. And he said, how's your voice? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. He goes, you need to smooth it out a little bit. So he goes, do you drink coffee? I'm like, well, I have. He goes, here. And he opens up his shirt pocket and he pulls out some cigarettes. He goes, here, smoke these in between your stop sets and drink coffee all night, and it'll smooth out your voice. So I'm over there ripping cigarettes and drinking coffee in between every stop set. And you can imagine my health deteriorated pretty quickly after that.
You look like a 90-year-old person in like 6 months of working the night shift as a DJ. That is awesome. So I can pretty much guarantee you that I may only refer to you as Maverick from here on out. So just an FYI, that's happening for sure.
It'll just be like we're old best friends. Yeah, perfect. Absolutely.
So let me ask you this. So I want to get into just learning a little bit more about you. And like I said, I want to do it through stories. I love stories, just the one you told now. Love it. My favorite part of talking to anybody is just hearing their history through stories and experiences. So as you look back to your career, what is like one or two of the funniest things that have ever happened to you can remember?
One of the funniest things that ever happened was while I was at Leggett. First, I worked with Mark Quinn, who's my co-host, and that's where we started the Dos Marcos podcast. But Quinn eventually left, and he started Spink & Co., which is, the farm to bedroom brand he brought over from England. And so when Quinn left, I took over his role heading up marketing for that division at Leggett. And we had a product called Somnigel. And anybody that's in the mattress business knows exactly what this is. It's purple. Like the purple gel we licensed from the founders of that company, Tony and Terry Pierce. And it was blue because you could dye it any color you wanted. And it was called Somnigel. And we had the production capacity and this equipment and this cool component that nobody could figure out how to sell. And by the way, I'm going to ruin the end of the story for you. Nobody figured out how to sell it until Purple did it.
Really? Because I never heard of
Somnigel. So by the way, if you go to somnigel.com, you can get proof of this story I'm about to tell. SOMNIGEL. So we were trying to figure out how to sell this product, Somnigel. And I went out and I talked to retailers, and they were saying, some people had floored it. They were actually, it was in the market as a finished mattress. And they were saying, we can't quite figure out how to position this whenever the customer we're taking them around our sales presentation. And we're showing them foam, and we're showing them hybrids, and we're showing them, innerspring or whatever it might be. We just can't quite figure out how to position. I go, well, tell me about the product. Like what do you say about it? What's different about it? And overwhelmingly, they were focused on durability. I mean, you could stretch this stuff to like 20 times its resting state, and you could roll rollators over the top of it, and this stuff would not break down. And it's really cool too, because you're talking 22% contact surface. Mm-hmm. So the majority of this is open air. And so I'm like, durability. So this is echoing in my head for a long time. Let's focus on durability. Like, let's just add fuel to that messaging fire. And so I was like, what is a universal symbol of heaviness that's also something that would play well on camera? Elephants. So
yeah, first thing
I worked with so I worked with an assistant named Vicky, who was amazing. And I said, Vicky, I need you to help me find some elephants. And she's like, this is the strangest request I've ever had. But she did it. And there was a guy about an hour away that had these educational elephants. They used to be part of the circus, and circuses have shut down. And so they do like kids programming and things like this. I'm like, perfect. Can he bring them down? So I go up and meet the guy and check it all out. He says, sure, here's how much it is to hire an elephant. We set it up, and we were going to do it at Leggett and Platt's testing lab. And the guy that was running it at the time was like, no, we're not going to do that in case the elephants, release what elephants release all over the floor.
Yeah.
And so I ran it up the flagpole even further. And I was like, look, this is really important. Like, we need to have these elephants. And so I finally got the green light. So we get it all set up, and we have production crews, and we're going to make this video. The elephants do all kinds of fun stuff with Somnigel, stepping on it, and, just showing that it can be resilient even with all of this weight on top of it. And so the guy shows up to the Leggett and Platt testing center with this giant semi with the elephant in it. And he pulls me aside. And he says, hey, I brought an extra elephant. I said, you can charge me any more? He said, no. And I'm like, 2 for the price of 1. He goes, well, the reason I brought her is because the other one will behave if the other elephant's here. And I was like, so there's a behavior issue if there's only 1 elephant, but you give me 2 elephants and everything's going to go fine. Well, he unloads them, and you're talking like there's not a harness for elephants. They just start walking into the building, trunk and tail, walking into the building, walking like hundreds of yards past all this machinery and innerspring making equipment and testing facilities up to this main area where we have the rollators and the Cornell machine and all the pressure mapping and testing and stuff like that. And here they are. And people are just lined up with cameras out. And some people called their kids from school. I didn't even know how many people actually worked there until I saw them just creating this like fan tunnel for the elephants that were coming in. And so they get in there, and they said, make sure you have some apples on hand. So I had somebody go to the store and get some apples ahead of time, a big bag, giant bag of apples. So they plow through that bag of apples in about 10 minutes. So I'm like, Susan, head to the store. We need more apples. So the elephants are in there, and he had told me ahead of time. He's like, yeah, once they start, doing their educational stuff, they're kind of like house trained. And I was like, okay, cool. This is going to be fine. But they still brought in a giant bucket and shovels and all this like sawdust. So about 30 minutes in, we're trying to get all these shots, and they were like standing on the Somnigel, and it was recovering, and it's all just going beautifully. And then the elephants just start taking elephant-sized dumps all over the place. And the guy that had the elephants, his girlfriend, she had these high heels on, and she's like running around, like jab stepping up to the back of this elephant with giant shovels, catching it as it's falling out and trying to put it in the bucket. I've got a mop bucket out, and I'm cleaning up the pee that's everywhere. And that was pretty much the extent of the day. And luckily the elephants, there are people standing behind the elephants, and they would break wind, and like it was the real deal. And then at one point I remember you had us like standing around in front of the elephants, and they make a sound that's almost like otherworldly, and it sounds just like a velociraptor from Jurassic Park. And there's a reason why, because they sampled it from an elephant, and it's this little like, and they start doing that, and I literally was running before my brain could say stop, you're safe. So the elephants gave us a day full of janitorial service practice and good times. And on the backside of it, we made this amazing video and all kinds of content around it, and created a campaign to promote Somnigel. And we definitely raised awareness. But like I said, nobody figured out how to sell it until Purple did. Because to get it to go from component supplier to manufacturer to retailer to consumer was a lot of game of telephone. Yeah. And you lost the message, and it just didn't work. So when Purple and Tony and Terry Pearson, that whole group, went direct to consumer, they were able to communicate clearly and directly. And obviously they created some of the most groundbreaking marketing this industry's seen in a decade.
And so that's my story. Anyone at Purple is listening to this now, bring back the elephant. They know it works. You've proven it works. You know it's going to recover. They should bring it back. That would be amazing. That's such a good.
Bring it back, Purple. Come on.
Yeah, I know. Bring it back. All right. So let's shift gears a bit. So that, set the tempo a little bit. Let us get to know you a little bit. But what I want to do, you've had this phenomenal career, and a lot of success stories, a lot of highs, but I'm sure there's also been a lot of lows, right? And I'd love to hear about, a time when you really struggled or you failed or, you had something that you really had to overcome. And how did you end up doing it?
I knew this question was coming. And so I thought a lot about it. And for me, there was an undercurrent that was sabotaging my life. And when I fixed that, everything changed. Everything changed. Changed my entire life. Saved my life potentially. And that undercurrent was I didn't even know I was pretty significantly depressed.
Mm-hmm.
And but I thought I had like health issues. And so I was trying to fix all these health issues that didn't exist, because what I really had was anger issues, and that were creating this wet blanket called anxiety or depression or whatever you want to call it. That wet blanket was holding down my real emotions. And if those real emotions of sadness and fear don't rise up to the surface, you can't feel joy and happiness. And so I was just numb. And this really does kind of, relate back to our industry. But, the long story, or the longer piece of the story is, when I was 8 years old, my father left, but my parents never got divorced. And he lived about 4.5 hours away. And he worked for the railroad, and he had to continue his job so he could get his pension. And he didn't have me until he was 40. And so he was an older dad already. People growing up always thought he was my grandpa. And so my parents almost put us into this purgatory. They weren't married, but they weren't divorced. They loved each other, but they didn't love each other. And from that time all the way through into my 30s, I had so much anger toward them. And I always thought that it was something that they would have to come to me and admit they did something wrong, and then it would all be fixed. And that wasn't the case. And so I was in Chicago, and I was up visiting A Lava and Sons. And anybody in the industry might know Adam Lava, and Mason Hallett was there at the time, and they have a big cut and sew operation, zipper covers. They make, they do finished mattresses now and things like that. And I was up there in Chicago to visit them. And I just remember being in their office, waiting on Adam to come out. And I just started having this panic attack for no reason, like no known reason. And it got worse and worse and worse throughout the day. So I go and try to, drink it away, and it wasn't working. And so I just had this torturous night. And finally I was able to go back to my hotel room, go to sleep, woke up the next day. Twitter had a notification. And the notification on Twitter was Anthony Bourdain hanged himself in France. And I remember thinking to myself, if Anthony Bourdain is going to kill himself, where am I going to end up? Because he had this life that I saw as incredible and amazing. He had a great personality. He had seemingly lots of friends that loved him. He had this TV show where he traveled around the world and got to interview people and have all these cultural experiences, a dream job for so many people.
Yeah.
Especially as, I was a young journalist, after that classic rock DJ stint, I spent 7 years in media where I was a weekend anchor and on television. And then I did a daily talk radio show for 4 years. That was like my first those were my first real world jobs. And so I thought, if Bourdain, has checked out in this fashion, where's that going to lead me? Because I saw myself as an adventurous person. And when I was pursuing adventures and when I was living out that lifestyle, I felt great. Like I didn't have all this junk, these barnacles holding down the ship. And so I'd always used adventure and athletics and all these different things to kind of medicate myself in a way. And I was like, this is bad. This is really bad. And I realized, I think for the first time, that it wasn't anything medical. So I flew home. My wife and I were talking about Bourdain because we both loved Bourdain and his shows. And she confronted me with a question. She said, have you ever thought about killing yourself? And I'm like, nope, but I sure want to die a lot of times. She's like, that's not normal. That's not normal. You need to go see somebody. And so finally, after all these decades, I'm like, I'm going to confront this because what I've been doing isn't working. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to talk to somebody about anything I have going on. I just didn't want to, but I'm like, I'm willing to do something different than what I've been doing, because it is the definition of insanity. If you keep doing the same things over and over and it's not changing anything. And I knew in my heart of hearts, I'm like, this is not an issue where I need to take pills. It just wasn't. Like, I knew deep down, like, I was an effervescent, fun-loving person, but I was just struggling with something that was an undercurrent that was always there and would rear its ugly head in these just demonic ways. And so I decided, I had a friend who was a therapist, and I said, float me a recommendation. I'm going all in. And so I did. And I'm the type of guy that wants to achieve. I want to solve problems. Mm-hmm. And so when I went all in, it was expensive, and I did it full tilt. I'm not talking like, I was going once a month or anything like that. I was going 2-3 times a week to my therapist. And, I would come back home and my wife would say, well, how was it? I was like, it was awful. She's like, oh, maybe it's not working. And I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure that whenever you open up Pandora's box of your life and confront those things, it's not going to be fun times. It's not, you're going out running 20 miles, training for a marathon. You're not going to come back and be like, that was awesome. Let's do that again right now. But I confronted these things head on, and I had all these, anger issues toward my family. And, realizing that you have to confront those emotions and bring them to the surface. And here's the deal, dude. I didn't even really know how to feel. This was like, I was a toddler learning how to be emotional again for the first time in my life. And it was work, and it was really hard. And then when you're not sitting in that room talking to another man who's asking you tough questions and really trying to get you to have a breakthrough, you're out in the real world having to say, oh my gosh, I feel an emotion. Don't stuff it down. Go ahead and feel it, cry, get sad, get scared, whatever it might be. And then the second half of it was, now you got to figure out, what is real freedom? And whenever I got to a place where I was like, this is amazing. Like, I'm a human being again. I felt like a human being for the first time in decades. And then the real sense of freedom, or the place of freedom, is forgiveness. And so I spent months and months and months truly getting to a place of forgiveness. And it's all about empathy. And we can say that out loud. But when I sat there and I had to walk through, well, what was it like to be my parents? Both of them had been previously divorced in the 70s when that wasn't normal. What was it like for them to have to navigate my dad having children, my mom not having children, her having had a divorce, and then splitting up, when I was 8, but not getting divorced, and losing all their friends because everybody wanted couple friends. When you start walking in somebody else's shoes and truly do that, you're like, wow, this was tough for them. And so I share that story because that changed my entire life, because everything that's happened since then has just been filled with joy and happiness. And I held my breath for a couple of years, and I didn't tell anybody what happened. Years. I held my breath for a couple of years because I'm like, surely this isn't real. What if it comes back? But I trained, I built up that muscle, and I confronted those things I had to confront. And I continued working on being an emotional person, because that makes us divinely human. It makes us so human. And once that happened, I realized how many people are carrying around very similar issues. And I can see it in people now, and it breaks my heart. And I just want to say to anyone, some of those feelings you're having, they're not normal. Otherwise, there'd be a line out the guy's door that I went to see. They're not normal, and you have to confront it by confronting it with another human being. I've tried it all. We are human. We are made to connect, and we are made to help each other. And sometimes your wife or your husband, your boyfriend or girlfriend, they're not your therapist. They're not there to do that job. And we, I think, have over-indexed a lot on, people in those relationships being our everythings. They're not. Like, we need a community of people to help us with these things. And once that changed, my whole life changed, and my marriage changed. My interactions with my friends and my family changed. I was able to, eventually share that story with my folks, which was incredibly freeing, but without the expectation that they were going to do anything differently, because I didn't need that. So it was a long slog. It was a tough journey, and it's even tough to talk about today. But I know, especially on the heels of COVID and the pandemic and the shutdown, people are suffering mentally. There's a way to get out of this, and you got to confront it with another human being and let them help you. Let a pro get in there and do the work. And there is shame associated with that, and it's scary, but it's so worth it. And you can change your life if you had a similar situation. And also, if you're not in a spot where things have gotten really bad, just keeping that muscle built up by being emotional and being vulnerable, and just trying to be there for each other.
Yeah. Man, that is I think the timing of your story is really spot on right now, because I truly believe, just in interactions I have with friends and colleagues, and I think there's more people than ever, based on the last year, what we've been going through, or who are feeling these types of feelings, and it's like, and I think people feel trapped too. And the fact that you can't even get out and see a therapist in person right now makes it even harder, and so, I really appreciate you being honest and transparent. And I hope that, people listening understand that, like, hey, here's somebody that, on the outside during all those years looked like he probably had it all together, and I think that's one of the things that happens a lot, we see these celebrities or these athletes, that will go through struggles, and it's like, oh my gosh, they looked amazing or whatever. But at the end of the day, you never know what's going on inside of someone's heart, and what they're struggling with and what their demons are, and so uh, I think to normalize, therapy is something that, like, as a society, we just have to get behind.
Yeah, it shouldn't have a stigma associated with it, because I don't care, because my life is amazing now. I mean, if I would have been in the state of mind I was in, having gone through this past year of, being virtually isolated,
Yeah.
I would have been in a really, really bad place. And I know that.
Yeah.
But truthfully, this past year has been fine, because I'm able to accept things for how they are. When I get pissed, I get pissed. When I'm angry and scared and sad and all that other stuff, and then it just works. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing to process things and work through them. And I think you're right. I think we do need to normalize that, because, yeah, okay, call it a business coach and everything's fine. Yo, you suck at business, so you had to hire a business coach. We don't say that. We say you hire a business coach so you can get better, or a life coach so you can get better. And there are things that we all have to work on, but it really does take those moments of recognition to realize what are those things, and then to have the bravery to go and do it.
Yeah.
Because that part alone that's probably the hardest part.
Yeah, I think so.
And look,
Tell me.
I want to say, like, your suffering is real. If you're suffering at all, even if it's minor,
Mhm.
we I think a lot of times try to compare our suffering to other people's. And, in Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl talked about this. I mean, he was seeing people dragged out of the room in which he was confined, and there was a step. And when they were dragged out early on, he would watch their heads bounce against each step, and it brought him great pain. And then over time, he ignored it. And he talks about our suffering being our own. His suffering was to a very high degree. You know, he was in this containment camp. The Nazis were holding him captive. He was seeing people dragged out and their heads bouncing against the steps. He was suffering, but he says, just because your suffering is minor doesn't mean it's not real. So don't compare your suffering to somebody else's, because if it's real, if it's actually happening, you can't just snap your fingers and take it away because you compared it to somebody else's suffering who is greater. It's really happening to you. And you got to admit that and take steps. You know, we always say action reveals the answers.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that, that overcoming that and dealing with that for all those years was obviously a personal and emotional, um, thing that you overcame. But can you think about one time, like one instant in your career that, a story of a time or something that happened that you really were like, you know what, like this moment defined my future success. Like this kind of made me look and go like, oh my gosh, like things are starting to work for me.
So back in 2011, a tornado hit Joplin, Missouri, wiped out about a third of the town. That's down about 50,000 people, and killed 161 people, 3 times the amount of debris as what fell when the Twin Towers were hit during 9/11 was hauled out of Joplin. It was a massive 27th worst tornado in human history. And after that, it changed everybody's lives. You know, we were on the peripheral of it. We didn't lose our house. Lots of friends did, and lots of friends that that we knew lost their lives. And we banded together, and we realized that there were lots of resources coming into the community, but FEMA calls donations the second disaster, because a lot of times people clean out their closets and give water bottles and all this different stuff, and they haul them into these communities, and the needs and the resources don't get connected. And so we had a group of people, like young leaders in the community, that got together, and we started something called Rebuild Joplin, which was technology and volunteer driven. And we were connecting needs and resources. And, we ended up making, national news. We ended up getting funded by the United Way. A bunch of money was raised in parts of the state. And anyway, that on the backside of that, I went to, I was one of the founding members of Rebuild Joplin. Then I left my job at an agency and went to work for Rebuild Joplin full time. And on the backside of that, it was pretty much a 6-month gig, and then I was going to be unemployed. But it was a leap of faith, and that really did change the trajectory of my life, because on the backside of that, I ended up going to work for another agency to handle a client and an account called Leggett and Platt. My client was Mark Quint.
So crazy.
And had I not, taken a very scary leap to go work for Rebuild Joplin, I would never be where I'm at today. And our goal for the whole time was Rebuild Joplin needs to shut down as soon as possible, because we want to rebuild the community. Yeah. We don't want to be an enduring nonprofit. And we ended up rebuilding or repairing 180 homes. And I remember being the MC for that and saying, it's pretty cool that we did 180 homes, because a 180 is a turnaround.
That's incredible. I love that. And it's perfect segue, right? Because you mentioned Mark Quinn, who's, the other part of Dos Marcos on your guys' podcast. And so that launched in 2014, right? So that launches, and, when you guys started, like what was the dream? What was the vision? What was it? Just let's just do this thing? Or was there like actually, hey, we think we could make this into this huge thing one day?
Well, we did not think we would make it into anything huge at all. We thought, I had a radio background. I knew how to produce a show. And we were trying to have a voice with retailers. We were trying to have a better connection to our industry. And, the only way to do that was through some of the old school trade media and things like that. We're like, no, let's form a community. And so we started something called Sleep Geek. And Sleep Geek was like this little kind of media platform for retail sales associates where they could do training and things like that. And we always needed content. And I told Quinn, I go, man, let's do a podcast about the mattress industry. And he's like, nobody's going to listen to that. I was like, give it 6 episodes. Let's just do an experiment. Let's just try it out. I said, podcasting is the medium of the modern age. People can do it while they're doing other things like driving or working out or cleaning the house. So it's a great medium, and it's very one-on-one and intimate. Like, we don't listen to the radio or podcasts in groups. We listen one-on-one. So you develop a real relationship with people. And that's what's happened through our podcast. Like, people know me, and they know about my life, and it makes meeting them in person just absolutely magnificent because we already have some things in common. So we did it as a way to serve retailers and retail sales associates and try to quarterback some of these ideas and curate cool things and talk about topics that were meaningful to them. And we did, and it did pretty well out of the gates, and we were able to promote it through Sleep Geek and through kind of LinkedIn and different things like that. And here we are, more than 200 episodes later, still doing it and still having a blast with it.
No, it's phenomenal. I mean, if you think about all those 200 episodes, is there one that stands out as your favorite? And why is it episode 69 when I was on?
I was going to say episode 69 was amazing.
So let me ask you this. One of the things that I love about, meeting you guys, and obviously I think I'm a perfect example of that, right? So we met through the podcast. Before I ever met you in person, I was on the podcast, and then we met all the markets after that and hung out and all that. But, leading up to that, it was funny because, I would listen to you guys and I would even think to myself, like, you're putting out so much content. Here's ways to get traffic to your store. Here's, tips to get better at selling. Here's all these things. It's these cool products. It's a new way to do your business. And yet you guys, you and Mark both had these successful careers going. And this advice, hypothetically, right, is helping your competitors. And so I kind of really want to ask you and dig into that a bit, is like, why were you giving out all this free information and all this great content?
And now they say that, maybe it's a dumb idea. we just could not do it. We just had to do it. We had to do it because we would meet retailers and we would meet these family-owned businesses and we would meet these entrepreneurs and people just really trying to give it a go. And we're like, we can help them. We really can help them. And we see parts of retail and parts of the country and parts of the industry that others don't see. And we need to bring those stories back to this kingdom and tell the people of this kingdom what's going on out there. And so it was just almost like we just had to tell the stories that were out there. And truthfully, it gave us a wonderful reason to go meet people we didn't know, like you. I mean, we all of a sudden had this platform that let us say, I want to call this person that I don't know because I think they're really cool. And I like how they are navigating this industry and they seem to have just this vibrance about it. I want to know that person. And we like highlighting good behavior and good actors and cool stories. And we like creating this campfire. And that's what really the podcast is. It's a campfire that you gather around and you share stories and you trade some ideas, and you probably have some tequila shots, and you walk away more connected and more fulfilled than you were before you got to the campfire. And I just love creating community, and I love being around people. And at the end of our lives, the only thing that really matters is our relationships with people. And this is our life. It's not just work. It's our life. Like, this is so I want to fly my flag really high, and I want the right people to come and get on our ship. The analogy, I use it all the time, but if you're standing at the harbor and a tall ship sails in, and all of a sudden you see the cannon sticking out of the side, and you see some guys on board hoisting up the skull and crossbones Jolly Roger flag, and people are gathered up. What do those people typically do when they see that flag go up? They run. Pirates are here. Unless you're a pirate, then you go get on that ship because you know you're in the right spot. And so the podcast has given us just a chance to fly our flag really high and say, this is who we are. And the right people have just been magnetized to this little community. And now, I mean, it's like you're leading in your own way, and we get to follow you. And, Mike Magnuson and Jeff Cassidy are leading in their own way, and we get to follow them. And Matt Mann, Andrew Schlesser, and Jeff Shire, like, we get to just see this incredible growth of our industry that only happens, I think, when we come together. And I think it's only going to get better from here.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you say, is there any way you become the CEO of Englander Mattress if it wasn't for all those years of doing the podcast?
There's no way. There's no way.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
I was VP of marketing for the bedding group at Leggett and Platt, which, look, Leggett's a big company. It's a $4.5 billion company. And bedding is the crown jewel, or it has been over the years of Leggett's bedding, of Leggett and Platt, because they invented the spiral steel coil bed spring in 1893 in Carthage, Missouri, right where they're headquartered today. So being, in that spot, VP of marketing for the bedding group, and then I was responsible for our in-house agency, which was about 40 people and served the entire company. So it was a sizable role. I mean, but it wasn't, I wasn't like chief operating officer. I wasn't CMO of the company, but I was known in the industry. And if somebody wanted to get to know me, boom, flip on your podcast app, press play. And I think that visibility and, having exposure to my board members, who eventually, offered me the job to lead Englander. I think there's no way that I have this job without podcasting, 1,000,000%.
Yeah. So kind of the last thing I want to do, I'm going to put you on the spot, right? So, you're been in sales a long time too, so I'm sure you've done this. I do this a lot when we train, which is I love to have people give me elevator pitches, right? So, hey, you get in the top floor, you're in Dubai. Let's make it a little longer. You're in Dubai at one of these crazy things. You got 60 seconds from the top to the bottom, right? You get in the elevator at the top floor because you're eating at one of those awesome Dubai restaurants. And this person comes in, oh my gosh, I know you. I listen to your podcast. Like I'm thinking I run a small chain of furniture chain or something here in the States, and I've been thinking about maybe, doing a podcast or doing something to get my name out there and like share content that I do, but I'm just nervous that like, why would I give it to my competitors or why would I share that stuff? So you've got 60 seconds, you're on an elevator to convince me as this new business owner, like, why should I give back to the community? Why should I give out my information? Why should I try to grow that from that perspective? And why is it good for my long-term business growth? Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I'm going to hedge out of the gates though, because I would spend that 60 seconds asking them questions, because I don't think you can argue anybody into anything. I think when the student is ready, the teacher appears, and you're going to make a choice based on you being ready to make that choice. But I'm still going to play your game, Brett. Okay.
Yes. You can play it however you want. There's no rules to the game. Okay. You ready? Here it is. Elevator doors. Hey, what's up?
Oh, what's happening, man? I'm going down, by the way.
You're going down? Oh yeah. Okay, cool. So I'm going down too. So I know we caught up at the bar here at the restaurant just briefly, but I wanted to finish the conversation. So you were just kind of talking about the podcast a little bit, and I was telling you I was thinking about maybe doing something. So what are your thoughts?
Action reveals the answers. Stop thinking about doing it. Take some sort of action, because you're going to have all kinds of questions. You're going to see all kinds of landmines that are out there, and you're only going to know what's going to happen the moment you release that first episode. So stop overthinking it, because you're never going to know what's actually going to happen until you pump this out into the world. And your first episodes are going to be terrible, but you have to understand what this gives you the ability to do. It gives you the ability to connect with people in a deep and meaningful way. And those conversations have an impact on the world. And if you're interested in that, you should do it. If you're not, definitely don't do it, because the last thing the world needs is more crappy content.
Yes. Ting. I think it was perfect. That was probably like legitimately right at 60 seconds, I would guess. So, and I love that advice. at the end of the day, I think, when it comes to a lot of things in life, it's not even just a podcast or whatever, but it's putting content out on LinkedIn or putting content in different social circles. It's getting yourself in front of people and building those relationships, like you said, even if it's not you're together, but it's through this screen, but it actually still works. And I think the thing that oftentimes stops people is just themselves, right? They psych themselves out, they overthink it, as opposed to just, you know what, I'm just going to do it. And there's just not that many people doing it. That's the reality. And in an industry like ours specifically, you've got like these 10 or 20 people around the country that are really active and out there and putting themselves out there. And so because of that, you really know them, just like I got to know you guys. So anyways, man, I cannot thank you enough for coming on to this podcast. I know I swore to you it would only be a half an hour. I think we're way over that, but this was so valuable for me. I learned a ton about you, and I just really appreciate it. And this is such an exciting time for me to be able to be on your guys' new platform, the Fam, which is just, I think, going to be groundbreaking for our industry. And I think at the end of the day, this speaks to exactly where I am at in my life too, which is like we've got to keep evolving, and it's time for our industry to evolve. We had this direct to consumer brands come in, and all the traditional players were so up at our, oh, it's not going to work, it's a flash in the pan, and then obviously it wasn't, right? And the reason it wasn't was because I don't think people were ready. They just thought we were just going to keep doing our thing. And at the end of the day, I'm glad that came in, because it's starting to evolve our industry. And I think the way people want their news, the way they want the content, the way they want to hear and learn and see things is a way that we can do that with the Fam, which is so exciting.
It is. And, creating something that has audio stories with every story is a way that people want to consume the media. Having experts from within our industries instead of just, hired guns, and creating community. That's what we want to do. And hey, if anybody's listening and you have something you want to say and you're like, hey, these guys have a pirate ship that I want to be on, you should definitely reach out to us, because this is not about creating something that we're doing. It's about shaping the industry and the direction we want it to go. And now is our time. Truly it is. So it can continue limping along in a certain direction, or we can just inject it with this new level of energy and push it in the direction we think it should go. And look, we're going to have successes and we're going to have challenges along the way, and we're going to have things that we need to course correct on as an industry. But if we're not shaping it, it will shape us. And if you have any sense that it's not going in the direction that you think it should go, and you want to do something about it, you should join the Fam.
Absolutely. So with that, once again, man, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Cannot wait for more episodes in the future.
Great being here. Thanks, PT.
Yeah, thanks, man.